Mr. Logic writes, in this case, the author uses the Quran as a source to try and prove Dan Gibson wrong. Dan Gibson has given excellent explanation and compelling evidence in his story presentation. While this author uses the Quran, which is in question, as there are many different versions of that book. Haha. Modern day Islamic scholars have now admitted to this. Oh, you mean Yasir Qadi? And a logical conclusion would be that the author's source of evidence is unacceptable as it is faith-based, which is belief without proof. Well, Dan Gibson thinks that Adam and Eve had the perfect marriage, and therefore polygyny or any type of polygamy is totally against God's morality, So someone writes, I couldn't agree more. The traditional Islamic standard narrative is largely, if not wholly, a fiction. For me, the nail in the coffin being the indecent haste with which they have more or less completely concreted over Mecca in order to prevent archaeology. Wow, so they shouldn't live like a modern life in Mecca or fix roads because, they're hiding the archaeology. Well, prove that that was their intention, first of all. The real truth about Islam is that despite their fetishization of the Quran, they actually cling to their traditions and not the book. Okay, and that's a bunch of bull crap. Many, if not most, of Islamic traditions are just a continuation of pagan practices, animal sacrifice, and humans when it comes to terrorists. Oh, so now he's going to compare terrorism with, sacrifices to Allah. While we all know as Muslims who practice that terrorism is haram. Mr. Logic, just like Christianity, paganism. Okay, so that was Stonefly. So Andre Agrippa writes, to which of the 300 different versions of the Quran are you referring? 300? They just write crap and act as if they know what they're talking about. And here's a link that explains Christian traditions, holidays that were practiced and celebrated by pagans long before the time of Jesus. Because these practices and traditions were so strong and adhered to, the church had to absorb them and make it a part of faith. Yeah, exactly. It's a pagan religion, basically, in practice. Okay, just ignore that. Jesus is human. Tell me, where is House of God? What stone worship Muslim? Does Muslim not see problem with Muhammad not preserving Quran as promised? It is preserved, you moron. And it's Allah that preserves the Quran, okay? Quran is memorized by millions of people, you morons. Okay, so it was always preserved. Qibla directions all over the show. Mecca is not the birthplace of Islam. Okay, so I'll go down to read my comments. Oh my gosh. Why are there suddenly so many comments? Did I go to the wrong place? Okay, so I said he debunked Dan Gibson. It isn't difficult. Mecca has always been al-Qura to us because it's the holiest city. Of course, people like Dan and Rob Spencer only see dollar signs when they talk about religion. They can't fathom that Mecca is sacred because it's the place of pilgrimage since Abraham, and that Petra was only inhabited by the modern descendants of the Nabateans by the Jordanian government recently. They used to live in caves, and now the government gave them housing. The Badul tribe in Petra don't even know how to get running water or make enough wells. So what technology their ancestors had? Dan G can't even show that the Nabateans are the ancestors of Muhammad because even Muslim sources don't agree on that point. He cherry picks and misunderstands every hadith or interprets what isn't even obvious at all. Don't defend his lies. Rickard, it seems like he developed his anti-Islam theory merely because the masjid in Jerusalem points to Petra according to his own method. But early Muslims in Mecca, in Arabia, not Petra, prayed facing the Kaaba and turned toward the original Qibla, Jerusalem. They never intended to pray towards Petra at all. So just because Al-Quds faces Petra doesn't mean early Muslims believed Petra was the Qibla. It wasn't. Dan is a Christian propagandist, so for him it's perfect and legit to lie about why Muslims face Jerusalem, because it faces Petra. Maybe we can go past Petra and see there is another place that the Masjid al-Aqsa also is facing. And why do all ancient masjids face Petra? Because they copied the Masjid al-Aqsa. I can also make up a theory. It doesn't mean anything I say is true, and same for this Christian guy who is quote-unquote self-published. I told Adnan Farouki, very true, brother. Muhammad Ahmed Laws, Mr. Logic. In the 13th century, two scientists discovered that by the solar calendar, the sun is over the Kaaba. Interestingly, okay, I made a mistake there. Interestingly, early Muslims didn't know this happens twice yearly on the same dates in May and June. They used a lunar calendar. The Prophet even says they were illiterate because they only know a month is 29 or 30 days, meaning they didn't have calculations. Most couldn't read or write. They didn't have complicated maths or geometry. Even the Kaaba was never a perfect cube shape, as people claim. Yet survivors from Petra went to Mecca in KSA and lived like nomads after Petra was destroyed. The great Nabateans Dan and Jay loved so much became shepherds and milked goats for a living. Yeah, like instead of building a great city again from scratch, what did they do? They became shepherds and sold dates instead of creating this awesome, city in the desert. Like the pyramids, okay? Pyramids were created by who? Who built the pyramids? And yet these great Nabateans, after they fled from Petra, which was destroyed because it was actually a place that Allah didn't love, so he destroyed it. And I think that's the real reason Dan wants it to be Mecca, because it was destroyed, and he's trying to tell all his Christian friends that, look, Mecca was never a holy place in the first place. Okay, fix all my spelling errors. So I said something dumb here. Okay, so in the 13th century, two scientists discovered that the sun is above the Kaaba. And calculated by the solar calendar when this phenomena will occur. Okay, so I made a mistake. Okay, but every time on the same dates. Interestingly, early Muslims didn't know this. Happens twice yearly on the same dates in May and June. They used a lunar calendar. Okay, and that's why. The Prophet even says they were illiterate because they only know a month is 29 or 30 days, meaning they didn't have calculations. Most couldn't read or write. They didn't have complicated maths or geometry. Even the Kaaba is not a perfect cube shape, meaning that it doesn't matter what the Qibla, where the Masjid al-Aqsa, for example, is facing, it's just facing whatever direction. And we still make our intention to pray towards the Kaaba in Mecca. Even showing that Qiblas are pointing whichever direction because it's off by 12 degrees doesn't prove that Petra was ever Mecca. Okay, that's just bullcrap. Okay, and that's the reality. So in the 13th century, two scientists discovered that the sun is above the Kaaba and calculated by the solar calendar when this phenomena will occur. The sun is over the Kaaba only twice yearly, but every time on the same dates. Interestingly, early Muslims didn't know this happens twice yearly on the same dates in May and June. They used a lunar calendar. The Prophet even says they were illiterate because they only know a month is 29 or 30 days. Meaning they didn't have calculations, most couldn't read or write, they didn't have complicated maths or geometry. Even the Kaaba was never a perfect cube shape, as people claim. Some people do. Yet survivors from Petra went to Mecca in KSA and lived like nomads after Petra was destroyed. The great Nabateans Dan and Jay loved so much became shepherds and milk goats for a living. So you see my point. They didn't build cisterns, they didn't do anything special. They didn't even try to build a pyramid or any kind of great structure. Okay, the Kaaba for us, it was quite special, but the reason it's special is because it was first built by Abraham and Ismail alayhim salam. So that's all we care about. And that's why it's Qura for us. It has nothing to do with being a great center for civilization or, like economic greatness or anything like that. It has only to do with religiosity. And that's what Muslims care about, is being moral and righteous. And we don't care about Dan's opinion of, polygyny or anything else, because he's a bigot.